He's one of the owners of the bait shop here. He's also done a lot of guiding and stuff like that. Fished probably most of his life. So he's going to give you all some instruction on striper fishing, going to go over some lures, techniques, and different things. Feel free to ask questions. I don't know if you want to hold questions till the end or throughout, but
well, periodically I'll just stop and make sure everybody's following what I'm doing.
but definitely pick his brain, and hopefully y'all can catch some big ones this year. So.
Thank you. So, what is everybody's main technique they're using right now? As far as, are we just casting, are we trolling?
All we ever do is drifting, barb fishing pretty much.
Not striper fishing. Well,
we put the bait in with the hook and hope something eats it. That's what we
Right.
do.
We haven't caught it.
I'm with her. That's what I do.
Yeah,
what we're,
and because we weren't catching anything with 2, we went and bought 2 more, so now we don't catch anything with 4.
We've freed more of your minnows than anybody else probably.
the main thing is you gotta make sure you're actually on the bottom. Sometimes a lot of people are drifting and they don't realize their baits are not on the bottom.
Yeah, you can
That basically boils down to fishing tide changes and not fishing when the current is at its peak. Because a lot of times, believe it or not, when you're drifting in 40 feet of water, it can take 10 ounces to stay on the bottom.
And we even threw an anchor out once just to slow us down a little bit. We didn't really hold.
Yeah.
Then we caught something, believe it or not. Actually caught a shark, it was dead.
Shark, you caught it with the
20 foot
anchor.
of leader on it, got caught in the anchor, we pulled it up, and there's this little 2-foot shark on the end of it.
Nice.
Well, how many have actually striper fished?
Caught one or actually just gone fishing?
Well, gone fishing, and if you've been in the last 2 years and you haven't done anything, it's not your fault. Because we just have had, ever since Sandy came through, it messed our fishing up so bad. We had so much rainwater, I think it ran all the fish so far offshore that it's gonna, hopefully, I'm seeing signs of stripers again in the inlet here at night. And just talking to customers that are starting to catch them. We still have a ton of bluefish out there right now. And they'll eat anything you throw in the water.
They taste terrible, they're oily and full of bones.
Eat the small ones. Usually smoking them is a real good way to eat them. But most of the fishing that's done early in the year is either casting, bucktails, something similar to this, maybe heavier. Towards the islands, on the corners where the current rips around, stripers will line up in those rips. And even early in the morning, using topwater plugs and floater divers, which are, they'll float until you crank them, and then they'll tide. And you'll find those fish right at daylight, and they will be so tight to the rocks that you probably damage more baits hitting the rocks than you will catching the fish. But a lot of times, if you're not right up against those rocks, the fish are in the rocks, just sitting there waiting to ambush something. And stripers being nocturnal until the wintertime, and they get into short days when the sun's further to the south, they will stay in the dark. That's why everybody mainly will go fishing for them at night. Then there's trolling techniques, and there's a lot of different ways you can troll for fish with using the current. And I've seen a lot of people come in very frustrated because they've gotten hung a lot. They get wrapped on the pilings. And the main thing when you're in that situation there, if you are on the bridge and you have your pilings, got one going right. Oh well. We'll see. you have 3 pilings that are supporting the bridge and they're spaced apart. And if you are fairly close to the islands, it depends on which way the current's running through them. If you're fairly, or within, say, 200-300 yards of the islands, you'll find that because of the island mass, it causes the current to run in this direction. So you'll find current running on this angle through the pilings. So what you would want to do, if you trolled in this direction, the current is going to wrap all your baits around the poles. And you're going to constantly be hung. So you have to use that water to your advantage. So you would go in this direction trolling, and it will keep your lines this way, and you won't get hung. I mean, you will get hung because occasionally you're gonna get too close.
You're talking
But
about
for the majority of the
wire
time,
lining here.
huh?
You're talking about wire lining here.
Or trolling.
Or
It
throwing
doesn't necessarily
wire
have to
line-
be wire, but, I mean, we used to go, believe it or not, troll stretches down the bridge.
Mhm.
But if you troll those diving baits in the wrong direction, you will lose them.
So you're gonna kind of troll towards the island.
You just gotta look and see, when you get out there, you can tell by the current rings that come off the island, which way the current's going. And then there's, as the bridge goes across the bay, it turns. And then sometimes the bottom contour will cause the water to be in a certain angle, or you get different, there's a lot of things that will affect the current out there. So that's just, you gotta really pay attention to direction of current so that you don't wind up losing a lot of things. And it also will allow your baits to stay in the ambush zone for the fish to hit them a lot longer.
You got
That's
an
one
interesting
technique.
technique of a line there. Are you saying you're driving your boat, say on the up current side,
Right.
and then every time you hit a pylon, you drive in there and then come back out, or what?
Well, what you,
Your
yeah,
line
you
is-
can,
Your line's
you
in
can
the-
tend to, as you pass a pole and you see where your lines are, you can let it come in and
Let it drift a little bit inside and then come back?
well, you can just kind of do this with the boat as you're going along, and what it'll do is you go like this, with the current, it'll put you closer to the bridge and you turn back into the current.
How far back is your line?
Well, that's, you can see your angle, usually, if you're doing a diving bait, you can see where it's at. Most of the stretches or most diving baits will dive 20 feet.
But how much line are you letting out, when you're doing this?
Most of the time, I would say we're probably letting out 50 to 100 feet. If you let out too much, you'll lose control. If your line is more than 2 pylons back,
Yeah,
then you'll lose. So basically, you don't want to let it out so far that when you're at the next set of pylons, it's still back behind the other one. So, and that involves using heavier weights or a diving bait. Or you can cast, a lot of times you can hold a boat up current if you're in the center console and just bump it in gear, pull out a little bit, you knock it neutral, you will hover for almost a minute before you start to go back into the bridge, and that'll give you time to cast. The stripers all line up on the edges of these poles. If you've ever gone around the back of one of them, and get real close to it, you'll see fish stacked in that little eddy. They'll just be on top of each other on your bottom machine. And sometimes when you're casting, we would cast to the front pole or we cast at the back pole. Because they'll get in and rest, they'll get in between the poles.
so they prefer the
Stripers are,
down current side while
Right.
they're resting waiting.
and they are an ambush fish. They will,
They're slow swimmers.
anywhere you can find a drop off, they'll be hanging below the drop off waiting for something to come over.
They sit mostly where the water's eddying behind things.
That, or in rips, like when they're on the islands and the current's ripping around the island, they'll be tucked up against the island just waiting for something to swim by and they'll shoot out after.
On the down current side.
No, on
I
the,
call it down current, I downwind.
well, it'll be, let's take this off here. This. When you have, your islands come this way, then your bridge comes off.
Right,
Then you also have the tunnel side. The
Sure.
tunnel side doesn't do, you don't have the rip as much there. That's a good, on the tunnel side, that's a good top water area. Casting over that and keeping the baits up in the air where the fish will come up and hit them. But on the, say if you've got this is the ocean side here, and the incoming tide, the water will pile up on the rocks and run around the corner like this. And it will, you can see it gets really strong. It looks like a
sure.
whitewater river sometimes there. And the fish loves just stacking themselves up in it because they get
On the upside there, are we talking all around?
all around this whole current here. Everywhere the current's pushing up creates turbulence in the water. And
So how about on the back side of that island?
you might find some back there, but usually once you get to the point to where there's not any current, I've not ever really had very good luck locating fish back there.